The sun beat down on the MV Fina, a Ukrainian cargo ship sailing through the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean. The ship, laden with military hardware, was on a routine voyage, its crew unaware of the impending danger lurking in these treacherous waters. Captain Viktor Nikolsky scanned the horizon, his weathered face etched with worry. He had heard the stories, the whispers among sailors about the dangers that lay in wait. The Indian Ocean, once a symbol of freedom and adventure, had become a perilous route for merchant vessels. The year was 2008, and the waters off the coast of Somalia were a hotbed for piracy. The Somali coastline, stretching over 3,000 kilometers, had become a breeding ground for pirates, driven by desperation and greed. These modern-day buccaneers were not the romanticized figures of old. They were ruthless and heavily armed. Little did he know his worst fears were about to materialize. The calm sea, which had seemed so serene moments ago, now felt ominous. The crew, sensing the captain's unease, went about their duties with a growing sense of dread. A small skiff, barely a speck on the vast ocean, emerged, gaining speed as it closed in on the freighter. The skiff, manned by a group of determined pirates, cut through the waves with alarming speed. The crew of the Fana watched in horror as the distance between them and the approaching threat rapidly diminished. Armed men brandishing RPGs and AK-47s boarded the ship, their faces hidden beneath balaclavas. These pirates were well prepared, their movements coordinated and efficient. They had done this many times before, and their confidence was palpable. The crew of the Fina were helpless against the onslaught. Despite their training and experience, they were no match for the heavily armed assailants. The pirates moved swiftly, taking control of the ship with brutal efficiency. Outnumbered and outgunned, they were quickly subdued and herded together on the deck. The pirates barked orders in a language the crew did not understand, their intentions clear through their aggressive gestures and menacing glares. Fear hung heavy in the air as the pirates, speaking in a strange tongue, ransacked the ship. The crew watched helplessly as their personal belongings were tossed aside and the ship's valuable cargo was inspected with greedy eyes. Captain Nikolsky, his heart pounding in his chest, realized this was no ordinary robbery. The pirates were not interested in petty theft. They had their sights set on something much bigger. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. This was a hijacking. This was a hijacking, and his ship, along with its precious cargo of tanks and ammunition, was now a pawn in a deadly game. The pirates knew the value of their prize, and they intended to leverage it to the fullest. News of the Fana's capture spread like wildfire through the international community. Media outlets around the world picked up the story, and soon the eyes of the world were on the Indian Ocean. The fate of the Fana and its crew became a topic of global concern. The world watched with bated breath as negotiations began, the pirates demanding a multi-million-dollar ransom. Governments and shipping companies scrambled to respond, weighing the cost of the ransom against the lives of the crew and the value of the cargo. The incident served as a stark reminder of the growing threat posed by Somali pirates. These attacks were not isolated incidents. They were part of a larger pattern of lawlessness and violence that plagued the region. It was a threat that extended far beyond the kidnapping of a single vessel. It had the potential to cripple global trade and destabilize an already volatile region. The shipping lanes that connected the world's economies were under siege, and the consequences were far-reaching. The Fana, held hostage for months, became a symbol of lawlessness that reigned in the waters off the Horn of Africa. The crew, trapped in a nightmare, clung to hope as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. This was just one story, one of many in the Somali pirate crisis, a saga of greed, violence and despair that played out on the high seas. The world watched, horrified and helpless, as the crisis unfolded, a stark reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows of the world's oceans. To understand the rise of Somali pirates, one must delve into the tumultuous history of Somalia itself. Decades of civil war, political instability and grinding poverty had left the country ravaged. The collapse of the central government in 1991 created a power vacuum, plunging the nation into chaos. With no effective law enforcement, the Somali coastline, one of the longest in Africa, became a haven for illegal fishing and dumping of toxic waste. Impoverished Somali fishermen, their livelihoods decimated by foreign trawlers illegally exploiting their waters, grew increasingly desperate. They began to band together, initially to protect their fishing grounds. These vigilante groups, armed with rusty guns and fueled by desperation, soon realized there was more lucrative prey in the busy shipping lanes that passed close to their shores. The world, preoccupied with other conflicts, paid little attention to the plight of Somali fishermen or the growing problem of piracy off their coast. This indifference, coupled with the huge profits to be made, allowed piracy to flourish. With each successful hijacking, the pirates grew bolder, their ranks swelled by unemployed youth, former militiamen, and even disgruntled professionals seeking their fortune. What began as a desperate attempt to protect their livelihood quickly morphed into a sophisticated criminal enterprise. The pirates, operating from remote coastal havens, utilized GPS technology, satellite phones, and fast skiffs to prey on vulnerable ships. They were aided by a network of informants, financiers, and negotiators, transforming piracy into a multi-million-dollar industry. The early 2000s witnessed the dawn of the golden age of Somali piracy. The pirates, emboldened by their successes, expanded their operations further out to sea, hijacking vessels hundreds of miles from the Somali coast. Their targets were no longer limited to small fishing boats or cargo ships. They now set their sights on oil tankers, chemical carriers, and even luxury yachts. The world watched in horror as the pirates, armed with rocket-propelled grenades and machine guns, took hundreds of hostages and held ships for ransom, demanding millions of dollars for their release. The hijacking of the Sirius Star, a Saudi supertanker carrying 2 million barrels of oil in 2008, sent shockwaves through the global shipping industry. The sheer audacity of the attack, hundreds of miles off the Kenyan coast, highlighted the pirates' reach and ambition. The pirates, often romanticized as modern-day Robin Hoods by some, were ruthless in their pursuit of profit. They operated with impunity, taking advantage of the lack of effective governance in Somalia and the reluctance of foreign navies to risk the lives of their personnel in dangerous rescue missions. The ransoms paid, often millions of dollars, fueled the pirate economy, attracting new recruits and financing the purchase of more sophisticated weapons and equipment. The international community, slow to react to the growing crisis, was finally forced to take notice. The economic impact of piracy, with increased insurance premiums, delayed shipments, and the cost of naval deployments, was becoming too significant to ignore. The world was waking up to the realization that Somali piracy was not just a local problem. It was a global threat to maritime trade and security. Somali pirates, despite lacking the naval sophistication of their historical counterparts, employed surprisingly effective tactics. Their methods, born out of necessity and honed by experience, played on the vastness of the ocean and the vulnerabilities of modern shipping. Operating from motherships, often captured fishing trawlers, they would dispatch small, fast skiffs to intercept their prey. These skiffs, typically less than 10 meters long and powered by outboard motors, were low in the water, making them difficult to detect by radar. Armed with grappling hooks and ladders, the pirates would swarm their target, firing warning shots and often launching RPGs at the bridge to intimidate the crew into submission. Once aboard, the pirates, usually numbering between 5 to 15, would quickly take control of the ship, herding the crew into a secure location. The pirates, aware of the international laws regarding hostage-taking, would often force the captain to send a distress signal, alerting naval forces to their presence. This, however, was part of their plan. The arrival of warships, while a deterrent, also served to legitimize their claim over the ship and its crew, strengthening their hand in ransom negotiations. Their weaponry, while rudimentary, was brutally effective. AK-47 assault rifles, RPGs and hand grenades, readily available in the lawless regions of Somalia, became their tools of the trade. What they lacked in sophistication, they made up for in ruthlessness, using the threat of violence to cow their captives and force shipowners to meet their demands. This combination of daring tactics, low-tech weaponry, and a keen understanding of maritime vulnerabilities made Somali pirates a formidable force on the high seas.